Psyops are being run all the time. And if you're not aware, you will be aware very, very quickly. This is kind of how this stuff works. And so we need to understand how Psyops work, how Psyops operate, how they are run, who runs them, etc., in order to comment, or not to comment, but to stop them effectively. And so what we're going to be doing throughout this entire show, and I'll use this as a kind of a blueprint example of this. So the biggest thing about these operations that have been run on the American people for a very long time, and on you for a long time, on me for a very long time, is that if you're not aware of them, you'll get caught up into one. And you probably have, if you're being honest with yourself. You've probably gotten caught up into multiple. I know I have, for example. And so you will not be able to spot all of them because, unfortunately, there are just too many of them. They're being run all the time by various groups of people. A lot of people want to see things happen. The only way to really have those things happen is to make sure that they are just being run in the clandestine forces behind the back, usually with the government, other things kind of operating. And this is going to be kind of tinfoil hatty, kind of conspiracy theory-ish, but it's not, because these are actually real and they matter and we should talk about them. So what the goal of this episode is for you to be mentally competitive enough to see them happen before they completely start to dominate the discussion and the conversation. That's the biggest thing. And so really what I've noticed in terms of the psyops, the operations that have been run by the government, by other forces in the world, they generally follow a 3-step playbook. And the one I really want to pay attention to, the one that really I think has been, well, all of them are vicious, obviously, like psyops do no one any favors except for the people that run them, obviously. But I want to talk about January 6th, because January 6th needs a closer look. And it's been over 4 years now, and there's been a lot that we still don't really know what happened on January 6th, by the way, but we know what did not happen. There were lies by the United States government, that whole show trial sham of the January 6th Commission and everything, where they did not disclose there were, by the way, 27, I believe, FBI agents in the crowd. They had officers letting people into the Capitol. You know, they assassinated a person that was going through, Ashley Babbitt. They had no justifiable ways to use force in terms of violent action to kill a person, kill a woman, by the way, on the property of the United States government, which we own as the citizens of the country. So this was a massive psychological operation. A lot of people got hurt by this. And I'm not saying that because I'm a MAGA guy, I'm a Trump guy, I am, but it's a very instructive lesson to learn how these things are operated. So the first step of how to run a psyop is you attach yourself to a lightning rod of a narrative. So power, entrenched interests, of which always come psyops. Psyops are always run by entrenched power positions to make sure that people are being distracted and not honing themselves in on something or another. So power and power systems are always threatened by disruptors. When anyone comes in and says, I want to change things, or I want to adjust the narrative, or I want to do X, Y, and Z thing to make sure that, everything is set in stone for whatever this thing might turn out to be, that is a threat to institutional power systems. And they don't like that. And they want to make sure that they're dispensing with everything that is there. And so disruptors, no matter what field this is in, whether it's political, whether it's business, whether it's culture, whether it's your school, whether it's, your family, whatever, disruptors always come in the form of a lightning rod type of person or a narrative surrounding it, or both. So basically, this person, this disruption, comes in the form of a different angle on this, a different person saying the thing, whatever that might be. They come into an entrenched narrative about something that has been existing for a while, and they say, hey, I don't think this thing is working. I don't think that, this is going to be the beneficial way to move forward in this way versus another. And then people start to freak out because they're like, oh, wow, that might have a point to it. This might have a point to this thing or whatever. And so then comes the psyop. The psyop comes immediately after. Psyops are run because the opposition to power has to be loud by definition. And so the opposition force, the disruption of this entrenched power system, this entrenched narrative, is loud because it has to be to topple an entrenched narrative or power structure or whatever it's going to be. And so what they do is not necessarily quash the narrative, because that would put them on the defensive, but instead they attach themselves to an inherently inflammatory narrative by design. So they kind of, they give it not credence. They don't really necessarily give it permission, but they don't necessarily say shut up about everything. And they do say shut up about it, but after, if they want to run an op on it, they kind of say, hey, we're going to inflame and puff up this narrative that someone is saying. So, for example, in January 6th, the biggest thing that led to January 6th was that Donald Trump said the 2020 election was stolen, that the government rigged the election, that Joe Biden rigged the election, that everything was there. Still, it has not been proven. I have my own opinions on this, but that was the claim that Donald Trump made. They stole the election from me. We actually won. They puffed up the ballot boxes. They rigged the machines, whatever it wanted to be. There was a big thing with the voting machine systems and the giant Fox News lawsuit in Dominion. And Rudy Giuliani I don't know if he got thrown into prison, but he got indicted for this, I believe, or whatever. But he got, ran off, whatever. And so basically, this was the narrative with January that led to January 6th. And so there was this thing, Joe Biden wins the presidency in 2020, and Donald Trump says he actually didn't win the election, he stole it, and then a lot of people got riled up because Donald Trump is a really, really aggressive following in this way, in terms of people aren't violent, although some of them were, obviously, in some ways, but most of them weren't. But in terms of when someone attacks Trump, people defend Donald Trump very aggressively. I talked about that a couple weeks ago in our idolatry episode. It's unhealthy, I think, in some ways, because we should never be attached to a politician to that much of a degree where we're saying, hey, we're going to be, with you for anything, everything. If you tell us how high the bridge is, we'll jump off it, whatever. And so, but that was the claim. So the op, it starts to be run when they attach themselves to a narrative and they say, you know what? Donald Trump says the election was stolen. We are going to basically say, hey, we're going to acknowledge this. Look at this crazy guy saying this thing. That's how it starts. That's how the foundation is laid. The second step of how psyops are run is that the people running the op, they identify a bad guy. So all psyops need to have something to elevate for destruction, most notably the disruptor movement that's happening. So all ops are run for the purpose of elevating the thing they want to destroy and then obliterating it. So there must be a bad guy for people to rally towards, or else the people who get caught up in the op will have no way to justify their behavior. Meaning, they cannot get away with what they want to do, their nefarious actions, their lies, their actions, etc., without justifiable cause, quote unquote, justifiable cause to do so. So they must paint red an enemy of whatever their position is and say, hey, this is the bad thing, this is the bad person, these are the bad people, and we must stop these people. That is what they say on this. And so there must be an enemy for this for two reasons. One, to play this little bait and switch game, get the actual argument off of the topic, off of the concept, and onto a person. It's a us versus them type mentality. They don't want it to be about the issue, the people running the op. They want it to be focused on another person. There must be an enemy for that reason, and there must be an enemy because someone must pay the price for the means necessary to do this. So the purpose of a psyop is to completely disrobe, overthrow an opposition movement, to basically discredit, shame, put out to pasture a certain motive that someone wants to put into that position. So basically what this means is that in identifying a bad guy and identifying an enemy, you both, one, give yourself a target that you can go after, and two, you basically have something to say, hey, we're going to punish this person when the op is completed and this bad thing happens, and we're going to put that person out to pasture, basically. And that's what happens with all psyops, and that's what happens with January 6th. So basically, the enemy, ironically, the U.S. government chose with January 6th was not really Donald Trump, even though Donald Trump later got indicted for a lot of things, and they went after him with all the lawfare stuff and things like that. But the enemy was not Donald Trump. Because you think about who really paid the price for January 6th, and it was the people. It was the people that were at the Capitol. Donald Trump didn't get shot. Donald Trump didn't get thrown into jail without, bail or the ability to have a trial. He didn't have habeas corpus suspended. So and this is what makes January 6th particularly nefarious, is that the U.S. government targeted the people at the Capitol. And I want to make it very clear, not the people that were actually throwing stuff at police officers, not the people that were bashing in windows, but the people that walked into the Capitol. And by the way, you can walk into the Capitol pretty easily on any other day. You can. You're a citizen. You can do that. It's government property. You can walk into a government building. It's ridiculous. And it might be something where it's like, hey, you can't come in here, just go out, whatever. But to have the federal government, as we'll see in a couple minutes, come down on them that hard, to throw grandmothers in prison, to do all these other, it was ridiculous. And so, again, not the notable people at the Capitol, like Donald Trump, Nick Fuentes, Alex Jones, did not get thrown into prison for this, although they've all been come after it for various different reasons. I'm trying to think who else is there. Like even the QAnon guys, like the Watkins, I believe is their last name, Ron Watson, or Watson, Watkins, whatever. Like they didn't get thrown into prison. It was all the innocent people that showed up for the Stop the Steal rally or whatever it was going to be. And so they said, hey, this group of violent insurrectionists, militia, protester people with the don't tread on me flags and everything, they're the enemy. And they need to be punished for this. They're an angry mob. They want to overthrow the government, and we're going to target them. So that was the enemy they painted. And that was the enemy they kind of identified throughout the entire thing. Which leads to the third step. So the third step of how to run a successful psyop is you throw that enemy under the bus as a sacrificial lamb, an example. So when the op is done, when the op is completed, there must be a sacrifice for the success of the operation. So it is not only that you need to identify the enemy and say that these are bad people. You need to crush them. You need to punish them excessively. It cannot be a small punishment. You must come down on them with the force of 1,000 suns. So a group must be crushed by the people running a psyop in order to make sure that the psyop is run properly. Because the people that are running the op, the people in positions of authority, the people that are in positions of power, they want to hold on to that power. They don't want to let it go, which is why they're wanting to run this op to crush the opposition. So they must squash their opposition in order to claim that power. You'll see this all over the place. And this is where it's like they don't have mercy for their opposition. They don't have mercy for their enemies. People get crushed by psyops all the time, and no one cares. And so the people that got crushed inside of January 6th were the innocent J6ers, the people that walked into the Capitol, that got thrown into prison, shot, killed, thrown into jail without trial, no due process, no habeas corpus, no anything. And people were thrown in prison to rot for 3 years. Like, unspeakable. Like the fact that that happened in America, hundreds of people got thrown into prison as quote-unquote insurrectionists for walking into a government building. It's ridiculous. It's un-American. It's a stain on our country that we did that to our own people, that was allowed to happen to our own people. And again, if people threw a rock at a police officer or bashed a window or whatever, but 3 years in a federal jail without a trial, like really? And by the way, no one paid attention to this because why? They painted them as the enemy. They were the bad people. They were the insurrectionists. No one cared about them because that's how an op works. You dehumanize people. You label them as the enemy. They must be destroyed. Who got destroyed? Probably lower income, working middle class people who wanted to go to a political protest because they felt that the election was stolen or that Donald Trump was being treated unfairly. And Donald Trump was the only one that had ever stuck up for them their entire lives in politics. And what was their reward for doing that? Thrown right into prison. No trial, no bail, no right to an attorney, no due process, no habeas corpus. One of them got assassinated, Ashley Babbitt, got assassinated by a armed police officer who randomly shot her, killed her in front of everybody else. People got beaten, crushed, thrown into jail, no trial, no due process, and no one batted an eye. No one batted an eye. And it's shameful. It's shameful that that was allowed to happen inside of our country. And again, I'm not for insurrection. I'm not for violence, particularly in a government building, but that was a psyop. And I think people are finally starting to realize it was a psyop. And we should, because we need to learn from this. So psyops are running those 3 steps, ending with crushing your opposition. And if your opposition isn't crushed, you didn't run the psyop well enough. So whenever you want to see if a psyop is run, look at how devastating the damage is and the fallout is. You'll find out really quick.